谢谢穆秘书长以及这个 Taxi 他们这个团队以及
I would like to thank Mu, Dr. Yo, for letting us organize this event at Buddhist Hongshi College. And I would like to say good morning to all of the venerables and all of the brothers and sisters here. So last time when we all gathered here, I shared some of the social activism that I participated or lead. And then I think that it is incredible that INEB is actively participating and encouraging social change and social movement. So today I would also like to share some of my personal examples with all of you. Today I have chosen the topic of From Taiwan to Ukraine, Buddhist approaches towards invasion and war. So I think all of you can understand why I have chosen this topic, because probably none of us would expect that in our lives we would witness something similar to the Third World War, including Ukraine, which is still fighting, and the conflict between Israel and Hamas at this moment. And I have chosen the topic of the war between Russia and Ukraine and the conflict between Palestinian and Israel. From the inception of Ukraine war, we can see that Western countries offer their help to keep the order of the world. And I think that they're trying to prevent the world going back to the state of the Second World War, where the stronger countries prey on the weaker countries, where the strong countries with more military power attack those who has no resources to fight back. For the conflict between Israel and Hamas, at the beginning, we can see that Western countries have a lot of sympathy to Israelis because of their civilians unexpectedly being ambushed, and the country people were butchered, raped, and plundered. And I would like to encourage you to think about, as Buddhists, do we approach this issue with the same attitude like Western countries, or as Buddhists, we have our own thought arising from our Buddhist practice and studies? Especially regarding the Russia-Ukraine war, in Taiwan, we can hear voices like that. The Ukraine today will probably be the Taiwan tomorrow. Ukraine, as a country who claim autonomy, can be invaded. And Taiwan, although we think we have our own autonomy, but our big brother across the strait think that we are part of them, and thinking about that Taiwan's autonomy belongs to their country. Because internationally, if an independent country who has autonomy is invaded, that is called invasion. However, if a country is just ruling part of its own territory, and those rebels should actually be punished. So at this moment, Taiwan and all of our people are being tested for our conscience. Should we succumb to China because we don't want to suffer from invasion and injury? Or should we fight for our own autonomy and the original lifestyle? And we will soon to have our presidential election. And at this critical moment, we are faced with choices. Should we choose the leader that will help us to counterattack when facing invasion? Or should we choose leaders that will just lead us to succumb to this situation? This is not only a topic for a lecture. This is actually, when we look deep within, that's a conscience and choices. At this critical moment, what should we do? So actually, just right before or after the Russia-Ukraine war, there has already been a great tension between Taiwan and China. China constantly sent military flights to circle around the territories of Taiwan, and that brought us a lot of pressure. While China might see this as ruling its own country, just to quiet the rebels in his own country, all the nations around the world think otherwise. Because Taiwan is in a very important position in terms of war and military, and also Taiwan is very famous and important for the semiconductor production. So if there is a war, it will impact global economy. It's not just a nationwide problem, it will be a worldwide problem. So they really are paying close attention to this potential war. So due to the above reasons, US and other countries has been supplying weapons to Taiwan to support us. However, this actually instigates some fear in our mind because some people are afraid if we are more prepared for the war, that will further anger the China leader. So they have this mentality of anti-war, and they think that the US is making us in a bad position. And Taiwan has also going through changes in terms of our military service. There was a long time that in our country for men who are over 20 years, they only have to serve 4 months of military service. But now, because of our preparation for war, under US government suggestion, we have extended the training to 1 year military service, and they are offering completely different trainings in preparation for war. I discovered that at this moment, people from all walks of life in Taiwan, including Buddhist venerables, they are not happy with our government because they think that what our government is doing will further enrage the China leader. And so in the same vein, they think that the brave President Zelensky in Ukraine should not further enrage Putin. It's exactly because he keeps fighting, so the war is still keep going on, and a lot of Ukrainians are suffering as Russians. These people also blame our president for extending the military service to 1 year, and they don't like that eventually these men have to fight in the battlefield. Because I have heard all of the above opinions from Buddhist disciples and Buddhist venerables, that's why I wrote an article on my Facebook saying that as a Buddhist, I am inclining to keep the peace and I'm anti-war, but more precisely, I'm anti-invasion. Why do I choose this topic for today's talk? Because it is considered that there are 3 dangerous zones in the world. So one is Ukraine and Russia, the other one Israel and Palestine, and the final one Taiwan and China. It is a critical moment, and we have to refer, as Buddhist disciples, we have to refer back to the Buddhist scriptures. Therefore, in my PowerPoint today, I have proposed 3 stories and 3 questions that we can reflect on. My first question is it possible to prevent warfare before its inception? Like I have mentioned, there are 3 dangerous zones, and 2 of them have already been war going on. Is it possible for the 3rd zone, which is Taiwan and China, to prevent the war before it begins? Speaking of the method to eliminate the possibility of war, should we be more prepared for the war? Or should we give up preparing so the invasion side will think that we are not prepared, we will not fight back, so they give up the idea of attacking us? The former method will be, we will make us stronger, so our enemies will be afraid of us, they know that they are going to pay for the price for invasion, and so they don't attack us. The other one is that we expect them to become passionate Bodhisattva and give up attacking us. The 3rd question will be, war has existed throughout the human history. Can Buddha's teachings on advocating peace in the face of warfare be adapted to a contemporary text? including his speech and action. The first story that I prepared is the inspirational story of Buddha's incarnation as the king of longevity. The reason I have chosen this as the first one because the Buddhists like to quote this story to support their stance on anti-war. Long story short, there is an invasion happening in King Longevity's country. And the king considered war very cruel to his people. To avoid unnecessary damage and injury and death, he consulted with his ministers and decided to surrender and not fight back. After consulting with the ministers who all agree on his decision, the king retreated into forest with his wife and son. And that is why I really admire Zelensky's choice. He could have also done the same, but in that case, Ukraine will be part of Russia today. Of course, some of you might think that, well, is there anything bad to be part of Russia? But we have to think that if the people of all countries have to succumb to the other country and being ruled by them, historically, it has never been a good result. Later on, I will give you another 2 stories and you will learn that succumbing is not always the best solution. Sometimes you face more devastating consequences after you succumb. After the invading king took over the throne, he was still feeling insecure. Therefore, he tried to look for King Longevity. And eventually, someone betrayed King Longevity and turned him in. And eventually, King Longevity had to be executed. The king was about to be executed, and a lot of people were surrounding and watching that. And at that time, the king saw his son, Prince Longlife. And he pretended he didn't see the son, but told all of the people there the following sentences. My dear Longlife, thou shalt not seek revenge. Please consider the greater good and not focus on short-term benefits, for vengeance is not settled through vengeance. Vengeance is settled through non-vengeance. Prince Longlife did not follow his father's suggestion. He kept seeking for any opportunity for revenge. And finally, there was an opportunity for him because he successfully went into the palace and became one of the king's most trusted attendants. At the time, Prince Longevity found an opportunity when the king led his people to hunting. And then after hunting, the king was very exhausted, so he borrowed Prince Longlife's lap as his pillow. This is the chance that Prince Longlife has been waiting for. And at that moment, it was a good opportunity. He took out his sword and about to stab the king. But at that very moment, what his father said before he was executed just jumped out from his mind. He put the sword back, and at the time, the king woke up in terror and told this person next to him, who he didn't think as the Prince Longlife. He said, I just dreamt that Prince Longlife is coming to kill me. King Longlife assured him, no problem, I will be here guarding you and protecting your life. You can fall back to sleep. But this thing happened for 3 times. Every time the king fell asleep, the prince wanted to stab him, and he gave up, and the king woke up. Finally, when king woke up for the last time and tell him, I dreamt that Prince Longlife wants to take my life. And this person finally told the king, let me tell you the truth. I am Prince Longlife, and actually I wanted to take your life for several times. But every time before I do it, I remember my father's word, therefore I gave up. This is the story of the Buddha's incarnation as the King Longevity. At that time, he was a Bodhisattva and did a very brave choice. Ideal sounds great, but reality is cruel. Actually, during the conflict between Israel and Palestine, there were someone who tried to reach out the hand for peace, The former Prime Minister of Israel, Rabin, has tried to settle a peace agreement with Palestinians. However, unfortunately, he was assassinated. In Israel, actually, there were many humanitarian organizations trying to seek for solution for peace with Palestinians. But because of the Hamas attack this time, the whole country decided not to listen to those humanitarian organizations that seek for peace, but fully engage in the war. That's why I was having this question whether Buddha's example can be replicated and applied in the modern world, because there was this conflict between the new king and the old prince, and that was a conflict between the two people, so it was easier to settle. But now, when talking about Israel and Palestine, we are talking about two countries, and with some instigation of fundamentalists, it is so difficult to convince both of them to give up fighting and seek for the possibility of peace. Protecting lives is at the core of Buddha's teaching. And then, because of this important vows that Buddha himself made, based on his care for all sentient beings and not wishing harm on anyone, wars and invasions are to be avoided at all costs. Therefore, I'd like to ask, is King longevity stands for non-resistance the only strategy we can adopt in the face of invasion? This remains to be discussed. I don't think I can tell you all the three stories, so I decided to give up that second one and move to the third story. I want to tell you another story about Buddha's own motherland being destroyed. Let me go straight to the third story, which is the story that Buddha's motherland was destroyed. And this is actually a contrast between the King longevity story and this one. There was a giant country in the south of the Buddha's motherland, Kosala. The king Viduddhaba of Kosala sent his army to Kapilavastu and massacred the Shakyans. You may have heard of the story that the Buddha's motherland was wiped out during his own lifetime, and after the invasion, the people were mercilessly massacred. It was also a very long, epic-like story, so I keep it short. First of all, why does King Viduddhaba wanted to attack Kapilavastu? From the stories in the scripture, we can know that it arises from the Indian caste system discrimination. The King Viduddhaba's father and mother come from very different castes. His father came from a noble caste, where his mother was from a May caste. And we know that Indian's caste system has created many problems until today, and it's not resolved yet. Sometimes we hear news like women from a noble caste fall in love with men from a lower caste, and because her parents are not happy with the marriage, sometimes they will give honor murder to his son-in-law or daughter. So you can realize that the marriage based on two different castes are very fragile. However, King Viduddhaba's parents are very in love with each other. Once, Prince Viduddhaba returned to his mother's home country and was playing at his grandfather's place. And at the time, they were building a lecture hall to teach Buddhist teaching. And once the lecture hall was finished, completed, the Prince Viduddhaba went there and was sitting on the throne. And those organizers were upset with him and scolded him, saying that you, servant, son of a servant, how can you sit on the throne? And you have to know that this kind of words is very harsh to people from different castes, even today in India. And Prince Viduddhaba was very hurt in these words, and he had hatred in his heart. And he said to these people, please remember me, because one day when I become a king, I want to take all of your lives for what you've said today. And when later he became a king, his retinue reminded him of his revenge. And so he collected his army and was going to attack that country. And then Buddha received the news and he quietly walked into the front of the army. Therefore, I like to say that Buddha was the earliest pioneer for someone who attempts to start armed force. Like in Philippines or in China, there were examples like the tank men. Prince Viduddhapa saw the Buddha and he get off the horse and know that this is an advanced spiritual practitioner who his father really revered. And he asked Buddha, why do you sit under a tree that has no shade? And the Buddha quietly responded to him that it is better to sit under a tree of my own country that has my people. Imagine if these words come out from us, that will probably not influence the prince in the same way. But because these words come out from a practitioner like Buddha himself, it's very powerful. And Viduddhapa regret his decision, so he went back onto the horse and just pulled back the thought of attacking this country. And we know that in Myanmar, people have high respect to monks. And then there was a revolution where the monks stood with people to fight back the attack of the military government. However, the military government killed all of them, no exception. Therefore, I would say that the Buddha's strategy can probably not be replicated because ordinary practitioner cannot compare with the Buddha. Indeed, this strategy worked for 3 times, like the previous story. But after the 3rd time, the Buddha knew that it was no longer possible for him to stop the war from happening. We can reflect the following stories. King Viduddhapa, when he attacked under the gate of Kapilavastu, he discovered that all of the warriors are very skillful. They are very good at shooting arrows at the horse or the cart, but not harming anyone. And at the time, the king was so scared that he decided to pull back. But his attendants, who had ill wishes, told him, "Don't worry, my king. These are all Buddhists. They have vowed to not kill, so we just keep going." So I cannot help but reflect, why don't we Buddhists walking around telling everybody no killing is very important, so people know that we cannot harm anyone. If at that time the Shakyan warriors can effectively make this King Viduddhapa be aware that Buddhists might also kill and do harm, and then he will pull back, then maybe what following that, which was a massacre of all the Shakyan people, would not have happened. Therefore, I like to quote a story from the Mahayana scripture, when in the past, in one of the Buddha's incarnation, he was a Bodhisattva, and he was on a ship. There were 500 merchants, and the captain wanted to murder all of the 500 merchants. And the Buddha killed that captain in order to save these 500 merchants and their family, and in order to prevent the captain from falling into the hell realm. He broke his vow, and he decided to take that karma in order to protect more lives. He would rather go to hell himself. And now let's make a comparison and look at what the warriors in Kapilavastu did. At that time, there was a Shakyan warrior who was only 15 years old. He was trying to protect his country, so he fought and he got victory. And then when that boy returned with victory, he thought he would be welcome, but instead his fellow warriors scolded him and said, "Do you think you are the only hero? We are all as capable as you are. But because we are Buddhists and we have the vow of non-killing, that's why we didn't kill anyone." And then I was really sad to hear that conclusion, because these warriors were supported by the tax that people paid. So in a peaceful time, they lived because the whole country supported them. But in a critical moment, where for the country's survival, they are only thinking about having good karma and avoid falling to the hell realm. Therefore, Kapilavastu country had a meeting, internal meeting, and most people are inclined to succumb because they want to stick to the vow of non-killing, and for non-killing they shouldn't be participate in the war. Therefore, they succumbed, and after the enemy entered the city, there was a massacre. And what is Buddha's stance on this matter? We have to reflect on it. After the massacre, some bhikkhu asked Buddha, if Kapilavastu kept fighting and protect their countries, do you think King Viduddhapa would have a victory? And the Buddha answered, no, he would not. Therefore, we can clearly see Buddha's attitude. He didn't persuade Shakya clan to surrender. Instead, he dissuaded the invaders and asked them not to attack. Therefore, when we are talking about protecting all beings and stick to the vows of non-killing, we have to also have discernment on two levels. So on the first level, because we are sticking to the vow of non-killing and to protect all the beings, therefore, as a country, we don't actively invade another country. This is the stance and attitude as a Buddhist. And the second question is that we can ask ourselves, on the face of invasion, should we fight until the last moment or should we succumb? Have we ever considered that when we choose to succumb, we were actually conquered by our fear? We don't want to be hurt. And it is not a consciousness choice like the king longevity. It is not a choice of compassion when we choose to succumb out of our own fear. Why do I say that succumb is not a choice of compassion? Because when you succumb, it is possible that you face with the massacre of the whole city or even the whole country. And the next thing you know, your speech of freedom is limited. And you have limited access to spiritual teachings, and even the whole country is being surveillanced by your own government. Therefore, at the moment like that, you don't have a choice of what you have to say or not to say, because in order to please this regime, you have to say something that is in contrast with your own conscience. And in all of your life, you live as a slave of your own fear. And when you are conquered by fear, your life becomes governed by your habitual patterns. You are constantly saying dishonest speech that is against your conscience. And then on the other hand, if you choose to stand up and fight for your country's people's safety, and you are acting out of compassion, and then your enemy will be scared because they will know that they are paying price for their invasion. At least you fight bravely, and even if you die on the battlefield, that bravery will come with you into your next life. You will have compassion, you will be brave, and then in the face of all challenge, you know how to navigate. So this is not merely a choice between peace or war. It is a choice of life and your attitude. Do you want to always be conquered by your fear and be scared all the time and say the thing that does not correspond with your heart? Or do you want to be a brave person with integrity and dare to rise to the challenge? There are not many things in this world that are out of control, out of our own control. But I would like to share with you this two story and inspire you to think of what kind of attitude do you want to have in your life. So after the Viduddhapa king massacred the whole city of Kapilavastu, he said that they should keep 500 beautiful women for the pleasure for his soldiers. And after this 500 women were brought to the soldiers, they did not want to succumb. They shouted and yelled at those soldiers with bad words. And King Viduddhapa was very upset with their behavior. So he chopped off their arms, their nose, and their ears, and their legs. And in that moment, those women are suffering excruciating pain, and they were all naked. And one version of the story says that because Buddha was present, so he wanted the monks to give the robe to cover those women. And the Buddha gave these women teaching before their death and said that do not hold vengeance in your heart. You should let go of the vengeance and the hatred. And eventually these women ascended to the heavenly realm. And there were also 30,000 noblemen in the Kapilavastu who wanted to fight until the last moment. So in order to punish them, King Vidundaba buried all of their body in the ground, only with their head up. And he ordered a lot of elephants to step on these people's head until they're dead. And after all these noblemen died, they become the first level of saint. Have you ever thought why these people can become saints or go to heaven? It is because in those critical moments, they are being selfless, brave, determined to fight for their country, therefore they become the saint. So some people will ask me, Venerable Chao Hwei, now Taiwan is one of the most dangerous zones in the world. Do you want to move away, go to other countries so you can keep spreading Dharma? And I said, no, I want to stay in Taiwan, and if there is anything happen, I want to stand with our civilians until the last moment, because maybe we die horribly, but those who survive, if we look at the examples of Palestine and Ukrainian, their loved one dies and they live miserably. So dying is not necessarily a worse choice than living. And I know that my enemies are not Putin or even Xi Jinping. I know that my true enemy is fear. If I can conquer my fear and live it with integrity and bravery, then there will be no regret of my life.
好，谢谢。